everyone. Welcome. Thanks so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books in the Park. My name is Cara Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple. And tonight I'm very happy to welcome here Christine Henneberg as we celebrate her novel, I Trust Her Completely. Let's give a hand for Christine. She is joined tonight by Ana Coutinho. Let's give a hand for Ana as well. Thank you all so kindly for joining us. This has been a long time coming, and I'm really glad that it's finally here and we get to celebrate this novel. Thank you all for joining us here in person and also online. Hello, online audience. I'm waving to a camera if you can see me. We are broadcasting from San Francisco, California. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement, and so I would like to let you know now that we are operating on unceded Ramaytush land. We think that acknowledgement requires action, and so I encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. I have details about the Ramaytush Land Trust at the back desk if you're interested in how to participate in this project of rematriation. I have very brief business before I let these two take over. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. I have been told that photo taking is fine, but only good photos, no bad photos. Okay, we will not allow it. Yeah, try getting out of the store after having taken a bad photo. But I mentioned that to say, please don't take a call while you're sitting here at the event. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us coming this summer. It's the first day of July, and this is our first event of July. You're officially kicking off our summer series, which is very exciting. Please do, if you are able, buy books. Please do buy books from us here. We have the author here to sign them. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able to, we always appreciate it. And tonight we have a beneficiary of your book buying, which I would love to tell you about. So this event is going to benefit in part Access Reproductive Justice. So we're excited about that. Is anyone familiar with Access RJ? Fabulous. We love to see it. I'm going to tell you just very briefly, because I cannot do it justice trying to reframe it myself or rewrite it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them based on their website. So bear with me, okay? At Access Reproductive Justice, we envision a future where all people in California have the freedom and resources necessary to make empowered and dignified decisions about their sexual and reproductive health, including the decision to have an abortion without shame or stigma, and regardless of their race, religion, immigration, or economic status. We are building a future where Black, Indigenous, and people of color and queer communities trust themselves, are trusted, and have the social, political, and economic power to sustain their communities and to build the families they desire, chosen and biological. So, let me tell you. Yeah. I agree. I think they stated so beautifully, and I'm so glad that we are doing a very small thing to promote the work that they do. The country is disgusting at the moment, but there are so many really wonderful, hardworking people who are pushing up against that, including everyone in this room this evening. So I appreciate you. But let me tell you about how we can benefit Access Reproductive Justice. So if you buy a copy of either of Christine's books, we will donate a modest, albeit 10% of each copy that you purchase to Access RJ. Additionally, if you want to donate to them directly, we have a QR code at the back desk right here. I really encourage you, if you don't want to, I encourage you to get a copy of the book. Let's not be mistaken. Please do get a copy of the book, but also you can donate directly there as well. And folks just coming in, this is all additional seating if you'd like, just next to me here. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two folks who are joining us tonight. First, Ana Coutinho is a proud family physician, providing and advocating for the full scope of reproductive health care. She has worked in numerous states, expanding access to services that empower patients to have control of their own health and reproductive choices. Let's give one more hand for Ana Coutinho. And last but most certainly not least, Christine Henneberg is a Bay Area-based women's health physician, reproductive rights advocate, and writer whose essays have appeared in the New York Times, New York Review of Books, and other publications. Her memoir, Boundless, An Abortion Doctor Becomes a Mother, was the winner of the Publishers Weekly Book Life Prize in Nonfiction. Her 2021 essay, Why I Provide Abortions, was selected as a notable essay in Best American Essays 2022. And I Trust Her Completely, her first novel, has been shortlisted for the Masters Review Novel Excerpt Award, and it is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for Christine.
Thanks, Car, and thanks very much to Green Apple for having us here. It's closer to me. I want to kind of slouch. I really just want to say an extra thanks because of some of what Car already alluded to. Yeah, it's just it's a unique time, and I know your attention is valuable and it is coveted, and I just feel really honored that you are choosing to spend some of that time and attention here. So I'm going to start by reading two short excerpts, one from the very beginning. You don't need any intro. Then I'm going to jump ahead kind of halfway through the book in a few months. The timeline's very obvious. Then we'll do some discussion up here, and then we'll open up for audience Q&A at the end. Just going to scoot back a little bit for a second. Okay. I thought you were dead. They were the first words out of my mouth after her name. What a thing to say to someone you haven't seen in almost 20 years. Actually, by then, I'd known for over a month that she was very much alive and that she was somewhere in San Francisco. I'd read it in the magazine. But I guess I didn't quite believe it. I still remember the shock and the thrill I felt that day. Nothing was what I'd thought it was. Everything might still change. I spotted her a few steps ahead of me in the pharmacy aisle, peering at the cough-cold shelf with the intent gaze of someone who knows exactly what she's looking for. She wore green scrubs and an expensive-looking black coat belted at the waist. She seemed taller. Her short hair was fashionably tousled on her narrow head. Radhika. I thought she might not recognize or even remember me, but her face broke into a luminous smile and she said, Josie. She dropped whatever she was holding into her cart and wrapped her arms around me. She smelled like hospital soap and bergamot. I whispered it into her shoulder, my eyes squeezed shut the way you'd confess the dark, vivid details of a nightmare. I thought you were dead. She tossed her head back and laughed, showing her pretty throat. Not me. Not yet. Her eyes were fierce and brilliant. She held me in front of her like a doll. Skinny neck and shoulders, glasses, pale freckles, dripping ponytail, smelling faintly of chlorine. You haven't changed, she said. And in a way, she was right. I hadn't. Then she said quietly, I've thought about you so much. For a long time, I wondered what she meant by this. What made her think of me, and when? What was there to think about? I said, I've thought about you too. I fell into step beside her as she barreled down the aisle and into conversation, loading sensible groceries into her cart with the particular satisfaction of a mother deciding what her family will eat, bagged bagels, baby carrots, and what they won't, junk cereals, juice. I noticed she placed certain items that seemed to be meant just for her, manchego cheese, chocolate-covered almonds, apple cider vinegar, in the top of the cart, as though to keep them separate and safe. She went through the checkout line first, collecting her long, elegant receipt like a prize. I followed with my little basket. It was the day after Halloween, and there were still bags of candy piled by the counter. As the cashier ran the pregnancy test over the scanner with a cursory red beep, I watched to see if Radhika had noticed. She hadn't. She was still talking, leaning over her cart, her long body bending like a sunflower on its stalk. They lived in Laurel Heights, just 2 blocks from here, she said. She worked a few miles away at UCSF, where she was an associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology in the family planning department. I asked, although I already knew, what exactly this meant, family planning. She explained that she was a doctor who specialized in abortions and miscarriages. She cared for the women whose pregnancies, for whatever reason, would never become babies. Of course, that makes so much sense, I said, feigning delighted surprise. She beamed with the satisfaction of a young talent fulfilling her early recognized potential. I noticed how she'd said the word abortion, without so much as a glance at the cashier or the other shoppers in line behind us. She did not ask about me, which was fine. At that moment, I wasn't ready to tell her the truth, that exactly 2 weeks and 2 days earlier I'd been on my back, hips tilted to the ceiling, while a nurse practitioner inserted a long syringe into my vagina. The NP told me afterward that I had a very small and mobile cervix, an odd description that made my anatomy sound like a compact car. The clinic had offered to test my blood for pregnancy hormones as soon as 10 days afterward, but I told them I would test at home. I'd been putting it off. So far, I felt perfectly physiologically unchanged. If the procedure had worked, I would have a baby in the first week of July. If not, my life would continue just as it had been. I could accept either possibility, was even enjoying that state of blissful, extended yet ephemeral suspense, when anything could still happen. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Okay, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit in time. It's very obvious that was Halloween. Now it's the night before Thanksgiving. Valentine's Day. There's a lot of holidays on this book. Okay. The night before Valentine's Day, Radhika brought me along on a last-minute errand. She'd forgotten to buy cards for the kids' preschool classmates. I'm sorry, this is such a waste of time, she said as we climbed in the car. You really don't have to come. Are you kidding? I can always use a trip to Target, especially in the car. Maybe I'll buy a full-length mirror. She laughed. Or a flat-screen TV. Or a hula hoop. We pulled into the underground garage just as an old, rusted sedan wheezed into a nearby parking spot. As we walked past it a moment later, I saw Radhika's jaw tighten. She nudged me and pointed to a sticker on the rear bumper. Choose life. The 2 O's were a pair of baby footprints curved toward each other. My absolute favorite, she muttered, moralizing to women on a bumper sticker. I realized I had placed a hand instinctively on my lower abdomen. I always forget Aunt Josie's pregnant. But it doesn't really, you figure that out. Okay. I made a little murmuring sound of agreement. Just then, the sedan's driver's side door opened. Radhika slowed almost to a stop, swiveling her neck to look. A middle-aged man with disheveled hair and a scruff of beard emerged from the driver's seat, uncurling his back in the way of the very old or arthritic. He wore a crew-neck sweatshirt with frayed collar and cuffs, ill-fitting jeans, gray tennis shoes. He must have felt Radhika glaring at him, because he looked up. I wonder if he met Radhika's eyes. I shudder to think what he would have seen there. She whispered loudly in my ear, "Doesn't that look like someone whose advice you want on your sexual and reproductive decisions?" I gave a quiet laugh, but I also felt a pang of something, some pain or sadness I'd caught in the man's tired eyes. I turned back to look, hoping he hadn't heard her. He'd circled to the other side of the car and now hovered at the passenger door, where another, younger man was climbing out. Radhika strode ahead of me toward the escalators, but I lingered, watching the 2 men as they shuffled through the dark garage. When they passed an overhead light, I could see unmistakably what they were. A father and his grown son. The same sloping shoulders, the same boxy head and small paunch over their belts. The son wore a hoodie and jeans, ratty tennis shoes like his dad's. I couldn't place his age. He could have been 25 or 45. He had the unmistakable thick, humped neck and bunched facial features of the congenitally disabled. His eyes squinted through thick glasses. His forehead seemed to push his eyes and nose and mouth together near his chin. His jaw was slack. His smiling mouth hung open. His father kept a hand lightly on his back as they walked. Then, stopping by a row of shopping carts, he murmured something. The son nodded and began maneuvering the nearest cart out of a long, nested line. The cart was a bit stuck. He jiggled it, frustrated, ineffective. The father watched him struggle for a moment. Then, with a tenderness almost too sweet to bear, touched his elbow and stepped behind him, their arms making parallel lines as they both gripped the handlebar and, with a little jerk, wrestled the cart free. In a brief, almost imperceptible moment, I saw the son tilt his head, touching his ear to his father's shoulder. I turned away. Radhika was already marching up the escalator with her long legs. I hurried to catch up. Back in the garage 10 minutes later, Valentine's cards in hand, we passed the car with the bumper sticker. I saw Radhika glance at it again and roll her eyes. I decided to tell her what I'd seen, doing my best to describe the son. He was, obviously handicapped, mentally and physically. She listened impatiently, as though she already had an answer for whatever I was trying to explain. "Mm-hmm," she said when I'd finished. "And I'm sure his dad loves him and can't imagine his life without him. He should get a bumper sticker that says, 'We chose to have a child with a chromosomal anomaly,' or 'We love our son.' But his experience doesn't give him the prerogative to tell me what to do with my body and my family." Of course she was right. I wished I hadn't brought it up. There was something about the whole thing, anyway, that I hadn't been able to convey. The father's gentle touch and the love that pulsed between them like an electric field. We got in the car and drove away, the children's valentines in my lap. Be mine. You're cool. We're special friends.
All right, fantastic. So I don't know how many people have read the book or not, but the book takes place in San Francisco, which we're in. So do you mind talking a little bit about, why San Francisco and what made that special for you?
Yeah, and it is so special to be reading it here in San Francisco. Josie's apartment is based on a place well known to me. It's out on Terraval, a few blocks from the beach. She goes walking on Great Highway, like in the sand dunes, that's kind of her decompressed spot. And then she goes all over the city, right? She works at Davies Symphony Hall. She's a copywriter for the symphony. She ends up swimming down an aquatic park at the Dolphin Club. She ends up riding her bike around quite a bit. So you see her kind of traverse the city. And I think I lived in San Francisco pretty briefly before I was in medical school. And then again, briefly during medical school. I think it's almost aspirational. Like, I'm just a Bay Area kid, and that's San Francisco always, and still has this, it's like the city for me. But I felt like, I know it well enough and feel attached to enough places here that, it just felt like a very natural place to put these characters. And it was really fun coming back here while I was writing it and retouching in with these places that already were very important to me, and show up in the book. So yeah, it's really especially nice to be out here in the sunset.
So the novel is largely written about challenges of balancing being a doctor, motherhood, writing, and other kind of aspects of both the characters' lives. And you've you hold many of those factors in your own life. How do you feel like your own life and work has, been represented through the characters and your portrayal of what you do as an abortion provider in the book in general?
There are a lot of elements definitely that come. I mean, all the things you named: motherhood, being a physician, specifically focusing in women's reproductive health and abortion care, which my job is different from Radhika's, but it's a job hers is a job that I am familiar with, or a role that I'm familiar with, and writing, and then the bit about their friendship. Like, it was interesting writing Josie and Radhika, because even though Radhika and I sort of have this like a lot of overlap in like the elements of our lives, and Josie less so, but I was really interested in writing Radhika from Josie's point of view, and examining what it looks like for someone else to look at a woman balancing her life maybe in a different way than someone else would choose to, than Josie might choose to. But Josie isn't quite sure what she thinks, but I think Radhika's dilemmas are familiar to me. The dilemma of time. I think the early seeds of the novel started when I was coming out of residency and realized that I had been wrestling throughout residency with these questions about, did I really want to become a mother? When was I going to do that? Was it just going to be another, what felt like another sacrifice of things that I really wanted to do with my life? Even though I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a writer first. So during residency, it felt like a big, was I ever going to be able to do both? And then I thought I wanted to become a mother too. So these were these big questions. And Radhika's problem is problem of time, but it's dramatized through, and this is you find out very early on in the book that she has this serious medical diagnosis that's kind of haunting her. So I was really interested in that problem of time that I feel like I wrestle with constantly. But I was lucky to write this after having already written a memoir, so I didn't need to or want to play out my own struggles with those questions and problems in this book, because I had already done that. So it was really fun to explore them through more imagined events, imagined relationships. It was a totally different experience of writing, even though it was very much on some of those same themes, and themes that are familiar to me in a nonfiction way. Yeah.
I think we can all resonate with the concept of not having enough time.
Yeah.
So, one of the kind of big pieces of the book is surrounding Radhika and Josie's friendship and how that dynamic plays out, and kind of how they each live their lives, and how we as the general should live our lives. And I'm wondering if you could talk about just the different approaches that they each have to their life, and also I think one of the big things that you mentioned is it's really only from the perspective of one person, and so really a lot of assumptions about how one person lives their life, while getting a more insider view to the other character in the book.
Yeah, when this would have been a kind of boring book if I had done it this way, but when I initially envisioned the main conflict of the book, or the main difference between these two characters, it was, okay, Radhika is someone who knows what she wants and makes deliberate choices, and that's how she thinks you should live your life. And Josie is just someone who lets things happen to her. There's actually this, one of the original books about abortion, which is by Annie Arnaud, called Happening. And I was very taken with the idea that she describes an abortion as something that just kind of this kind of series of events, unfortunately, turns into a series of events. It's not just one discrete procedure, but that kind of happened to her. And I thought that was a very interesting way of thinking about an abortion in particular, but anything in life, which is very different. I am not based, well, none of the characters is based on me, but when my husband first read the book, he said, well, but one of the characters is really a lot like you. And so that's Radhika. I mean, just in the like, I know what I want, I'm going to go for it kind of way. So I was interested in that contrast between them. And then luckily, the book developed, and that's not the only conflict in the book. But I think, one of the things that Radhika says to Josie is, one of her problems with Josie living that way, other than that she just thinks that other people should do things the way she does, is that she thinks it's an irresponsible way to live, in particular as a woman. And she says, think about people who don't have the privilege of just letting life happen to them, or think about, what that means if you're a woman of color or someone experiencing violence in your life. You can't that's a privilege to live life that way, just letting things happen and seeing how things go. You have to be deliberate. You have to, and I think she doesn't take for granted that right, or that, you could say that right to be deliberate and to make life decisions about anything, but becoming a mother in particular. So, I think it was hard. It was easy for me to write Radhika. It was harder for me to write Josie, just because I'm so different from her, in that way. And, but I think that, this, for example, this scene with the father and the son in the Target parking garage, like that comes up over and over for Josie. And, it's like a sticking point with her and Radhika of how can you judge the decisions other people make? And Radhika is very clear that part of her job as an abortion provider is not to judge other people's decisions, and is to actually give them information and let them make decisions for themselves. And yet we see that she's not that good at doing that in her personal life. It's also something I struggle with. So that leaves her and Josie in a very tense place as things that they each need to make decisions about. Kind of the stakes kind of keep ratcheting up, and they go about decision making in very different ways. I might ask you what you think about. I don't have an answer, except that I do. I think choice is such an interesting thing, and we talk about it in reproductive health care, like choice, like it's just, it's actually a word that was handed to us. I don't think it's like necessarily the best word to describe what we stand for, but we talk about it like it's this thing that we should, it's like this good thing. I think my memoir was a little bit about me wrestling with choice on like a very personal and intimate level. And I think this book is a little bit more showing how choice can impact friendships, and the different choices that people make, or the different ways people make choices, can be also a source of conflict. And you and I talked about this a little bit. I think at this point in one's life, like in your 30s and early 40s, and these choices about career and children, and can you do it all, and do you even want to do it all? I was really interested in like digging into that and the relational aspect of choice. Yeah.
I think that it's interesting to think about the fact that the word choice was kind of handed to us, because I think a lot of people actually don't have a lot of choice in some of the decisions they're making, especially around thinking about reproductive health care. And we kind of assigned the word choice to the people who show up in our clinics, in our, in other areas of our lives as physicians, but many of the people who don't show up actually potentially did not have a choice in how they got to where we are or where they are. And I think in thinking about Radhika, there's a quote in the line in the book that you kind of mentioned, that she says, "It's not my job to give anyone advice. I give my patients information and I tell them their options, then I let them decide." And I think even when we're talking with patients, let alone with friends, right, the kind of emotional investment obviously is different to get involved in somebody's life, and not regardless of the decisions they make. But I'm wondering if you can, I don't think our job, and for the way that I kind of practice medicine, is not making choices for people, but it's not just like a cut and dry, like, here's some information, now you make a choice. Mm-hmm. I think if you're really talking about giving information. It's helping to contextualize that information in somebody's life and allowing them to make their own decision, but kind of like, how do you not just be something that I can read on the internet and that somebody can like make a decision around, versus like when you're actually engaging with a provider, a friend, or somebody else who's helping you find that information and go through that information.
No, yeah, I mean, I think what you're asking is one of the things I'm the most fascinated with. If the amazing Christine Dellendorf were here, she could summarize this much better. But yeah, that idea of like, what's the difference between just giving someone neutral information and what's giving someone guidance in making a decision, guidance that they ask for and are participating in, and then making a decision for them or telling them, I know what's best for you. And I think, so actually a friend who works in reproductive health told me that she thinks this book functions as a fictional, there's something called what do we call it? A values clarification exercise. Like when you first start providing abortion care, like so many things in medicine, unlike other aspects of medicine that are like just rife with value, just like ethical and value challenges. But for some reason in abortion care, you have to like set it aside and say, okay, but we're going to discuss like how this might challenge your values and assumptions. It's a good thing. We could do it in a lot more areas of medicine. But that's what Radhika, my belief about Radhika is that she is, as a doctor, very good at this with her patients. And there's a difference in how she is with her patients and how she is with her friendships. And many would argue like there should be you have a different investment with your friends or your family when you're talking about their decisions and you know them better and it's a more intimate space and the power dynamics are different. But I think she does it better with her patients than with her friends, or at least with Josie. I think that is also true of some of us in reproductive healthcare. So that's part of the values clarification is like, can you look at yourself honestly and say, how am I good at this? How am I not so good at this? How could I be better at it? And Radhika has a lot of strengths, but I don't think she's done that. I don't think she's examined that very closely in her life.
Yeah. I feel like my own process in providing reproductive health care has caused me to kind of reflect on my life and my life choices and what I think about my own decisions and other people's decision, and have learned so much from my patients and my interactions with patients in how I interact with my friends and my family, kind of coming up with the same decisions. And I'm just reflecting on how she is able to keep so many parts of her life very separate and compartmentalized without really allowing the lessons that she's learned in one area of her life and her profession kind of bleed into potentially other areas of her life, like her friendships with Josie.
I mean, it's impossible, right? And I think it's impossible to, especially as you get to know more about Radhika, like how can she possibly separate her professional role and the issues she's dealing with her and watching her patients deal with from her own life? It is impossible. I think it's impossible for us all physicians, as much as we try. And I'm so interested in this, like, I think judgment and trust are, two sides of the same, whatever, coin, however you want to say it. But I just, I'm so interested in this question of how I can go in with my patients and like trust them completely, or withhold judgment from them. And is that really possible, especially when I just feel like so much of my life as a woman, and then doubly layered onto that as a mother, or even like as a person with capacity for motherhood, is about like judgment and shame and women looking at each other and saying like, what are you doing? What am I doing? And is your way better? Is my way better? I just feel like it's like saturates us all the time. And then to pretend that I can walk into a clinic room and sit face to face with a woman I've just met, who's talking to me about the decision to have an abortion, and that's not happening in either direction. I think it's rich for exploration. Yeah.
It makes you think. Therapists and psychologists, they go to therapy to like work on the transference, countertransference, which, we could probably all benefit from.
Erotica certainly could, yeah.
Our lives. And you mentioned kind of trust, and you named the book, I Trust Her Completely. Where do you feel like that, what did you want that to convey?
Yeah, it was it is not anymore, but it was a line in the book in one draft. And it's actually a good illustration of, Radhika, in early drafts of the book, I could use Radhika because she and I do similar work. I could use her to get across a lot of my own feelings or opinions or practices, because Josie loves to ask her questions and she loves to tell Josie books. But very helpfully, like in the editing process, I was reminded that I get lots of opportunities to write nonfiction, and that's where those, Radhika does not need to be a mouthpiece for what I think. I can write that elsewhere. So Radhika needs to stand on her own. But one of the sort of monologues she goes off on, she's explaining to Josie, about more detail, like I trust, my job is to give the patient information, and even if she's making a decision that I might not agree with, or it might not be what I would choose myself, I trust her. I trust her completely. And I knew when I wrote the line that I wanted that to be the title of the book, because it's just so, like, it works in so many ways. It also is something that I think Josie feels about Radhika, but with some dramatic irony, because I think from the very beginning, we suspect that Josie should perhaps not trust Radhika completely, that Radhika's maybe keeping some things from her, or Radhika maybe doesn't have her interests as purely at heart as Josie hopes. And, I also think someone else asked me if it's supposed to be something that Radhika's patients would say or feel about her, which I love, partly, yeah. I just love the idea that anybody would feel that way about their doctor, and particularly their abortion provider. And that too, I think there can be some level of irony because of what I was just speaking about of no matter how good our intentions and our practices are. I think, that question of whether two women can ever completely withhold judgment from one another and trust one another, and to trust a doctor who you just met, I think it's a big ask of our patients. So, so the line is no longer there, but I think it's very like, it's all, it's like one of those lines where you cut it and it's still kind of there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is going to be the last question before we move to Q&A, and I'm going to take a divergent, hopefully not hugely, but I think this idea of like, the idea of trust and thinking about we can trust individuals to make their own decisions, and how that plays out both in personal friendships, as in the story, but also in kind of the medical sphere. It is, we can see kind of the political arena that we're in right now, which I think there are a lot of policies being passed that remove choice from patients. As we've discussed, that's a loaded word, but also this idea that like people can be can make decisions for themselves, and that we should trust that that is the right decision for them in that moment. And trying to think about like how you contextualize this book and kind of the choices that Radhika or Josie are making about their own reproductive decisions, and they make different decisions at various points in time with kind of the bigger landscape in our country right now, which I think really sends the message that people, and women especially, are not to be trusted to make decisions about their body and their reproductive choices.
Yeah,
not that's loaded.
Yeah, yeah. This book is it takes place in pre-pandemic San Francisco for the most part, and so it takes place in California. People often think about, California, that it's sort of like a utopia for women's reproductive, like kind of that there's no limits or no constraints on abortion care or on any, gender affirming care for that, and that's absolutely not the case, although we're certainly doing a lot better in a lot of places. But it's not like the most liberal state for abortion care. Like anyone can get an abortion at any time at all. So nevertheless, they live they live in a world, and Radhika works in a world where that's pre-Dobbs and is in California, and a lot is taken for granted about, I don't think Radhika takes it for granted, but the book sort of as a premise takes for granted, like, that these choices are available to her. Radhika herself certainly pushes, I think, what we would even outside of rights, just like within the medical comfort zone of making one's own choices about her body. Like she pushes her own doctors to, I think, a radical trust in her. And I think that's part of why I believe about her, even though I don't put these scenes in the book, that she is capable of that and good at that with her patients, of extending radical trust to them. How Radhika would do outside of this time and place that she exists in the world of the book, how any of us would do, I think all the time how lucky we are to be here, how lucky our patients are to be here, and I think that if a book can work as a values clarification exercise, to push readers who may believe that they know what they think about what it means to trust women, what reproductive autonomy is, and push them to witness people making some decisions that they might not feel comfortable with. That's what those exercises are. So that's what the book tries to do. It takes some things for granted, but it also, I do think, pushes our limits of trust. Yeah. So I was trying to do that too.
Yeah, I imagine we talked about the book being set in San Francisco as the first question, and I imagine if this was set in Texas, it would be a very different book, a very different book, and a very different story, and probably a very different dynamic in how their friendship plays out based on the choices that they each make or the choices that they have access to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we're going to move to audience questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to give some praise, and then I'll segue that into an open-ended question. But I love your writing style, and it's so clear how, your essay writing has influenced this novel, because I feel like you have that, very clear, simple, and yet, vibrant tone of, a good writer, where, you don't need to, muddle your words to really get, give the reader a really clear image. And it's also, even though it's not like an essay, it doesn't have a clear, opinionative structure or anything. I feel like you are presenting these different opinions through just the plot in general. You're giving counterclaims, you're giving rebuttals, you're giving all of these different perspectives in this book. And with that, I want to ask you how else you think your essay writing has impacted your novel writing.
And just for the, I was told to repeat all the questions into the microphone.
Make sure you repeat all the praise.
I was going to say we got a lot of praise for the book, and then how your nonfiction writing, and specifically your essay writing, influences how you wrote this book.
Yeah, thanks. How you sound like you are a writer yourself from your observations. It's I do not think, even with all the essay writing and nonfiction writing I've done, as I've described a little bit, it was hard to separate sometimes myself and all the things I want to say and all the, let me show you how much I know about this because I can even address the counter arguments to it, It was hard to pull that out. And as, my best editors reminded me to let the characters speak for themselves. I think one of the greatest compliments I have gotten on the book is that it's surprised people, some of the scenes or the conversations that I chose to include. I think even the one I just read, with the father and son, that's what you want to do, right? As a fiction writer, you want to keep it interesting. You want to surprise people for that reason, but also because I'm not saying I am, but if fiction is going to make an argument, you don't want it to be predictable. You don't want it to be a straw man argument. You do want to present claims and counterclaims, and I think writing nonfiction and writing fiction rely a lot on like me being able to observe something and remember it and draw on it and connect it to something else. A lot of the, I guess, what you might call counter arguments or surprising scenes in the book are drawn from real, it's all fiction, right? But drawn from experiences that I've had that made me really question something in myself. And I think that's what good nonfiction should do to, there's probably other dimensions from which I could answer that question, but I think that's the first big one that occurs to me. Yeah, thanks.
It seemed to me that Radhika is often telling Josie, you need to decide. And just the way she did back in college when in a writing class. And then at the end, when Josie does decide what to do with her writing project, I think she's held off because she's afraid of what Radhika will say, and what Radhika says then feels like a real betrayal of you've got to decide because Radhika does not approve. And that felt like it connected to the title. I trust you. I trust her completely, but you can't.
Do you want me to? Yeah, I can. Yeah, I mean, it's both a comment and a question about connecting the title. I trust her completely to Radhika's always telling Josie, you need to decide. You need to decide. In the end, Josie makes a decision that about her work, her writing work, a specific novel project that she's working on. But I mean, without, she kind of, towards the end, she's sort of giving up on a novel that she's been writing and working on with Radhika's help. And it does, I mean, that disappoints Radhika, right? It's not what Radhika was telling her to do. Radhika had this sense that she is up against a deadline. She needs to get this done. She needs to have this accomplishment under her belt as she, or maybe before she goes along and then does other things. So a stepping stone or a compartment that she can kind of seal off and say, okay, now that's done. And and Josie really doesn't want that, or she really, she thinks she wants it, but she's not sure. She circles back to the bumper sticker when she's talking to Radhika about some of these decisions that she's changing her mind about. And again, towards the end, she says, maybe choose life just means that, just like let life happen to you. Choose just to live. And Radhika doesn't love that, that analysis. But I think you're right. I think, if you trust someone else completely, one question is, do you trust yourself? I think that's a lot of, there's some zero sum to it with Josie, I think. As long as she's trusting Radhika this much, who is she not trusting?
I also will say, just in kind of that concept of like, you need to decide, not making a decision is still a decision, and not making a choice is a decision. And so when we think about specifically about reproductive rights in this kind of context and in this book, I mean, here it's the decision about like writing a novel or not writing a novel. But I think in kind of thinking about the reproductive rights world, we think about people have to decide whether they want to have a pregnancy or not want to have a pregnancy, when they want to conceive and when they don't want to conceive, when they want to terminate or if they don't want to terminate. And not making a decision is still a decision, and ambivalence, plays into that. But like, whether it's being afraid of other people's thoughts or the fear of what wouldn't happen if you didn't, what would happen or wouldn't happen depending on the decision that you made, are all kind of choices that kind of play into these decisions.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And it also is another part of the answer to, I write about regret with abortion care, which is like this, they were not supposed to talk about, but regret is part of all human decisions, right? It doesn't need to be like a prerequisite to getting to make a decision for yourself there's no possible way you could ever regret it. People regret becoming parents too. They don't talk about that either, And I say that to patients a lot, that, there's a lot of apology that happens in abortion care, and apology for taking a long time to make a decision or changing my mind. I say to patients all the time, like, this is what human decision-making looks like. For some women, it's very clear, and for some women, it's very hard. And if you walk out of here today, having changed your mind, one, you could still walk back in tomorrow. And two, like, that's not you not making a decision. This is part of human decision making.
Yeah. Okay, so this may be an annoying question because it's about like writing process a little bit, but as a lifelong friend of yours and just like number one fan, I had to do everything I could to like not have a sign here. Number one fan. But I just think you have such a brilliant brain. You're such a brilliant writer. And now that you've written this gorgeous novel and your moving memoir and so many essays, the world needs your voice. I say this all the time. And where do you feel like this is the annoying question that you don't have to really answer if you don't have a specific answer yet, but like, where do you kind of feel like your voice, I mean, you're still publishing essays and you published this awesome Atlantic essay just a few days ago. And I'm like, so in awe of your perspective as an abortion provider and a writer and how you can so clearly voice all this stuff that seems so obvious once you've said it, but it's like, you have this great way of saying, so like, where do you have another like nugget or like idea where you're like, oh, the world needs to hear this perspective? And like, also, do you have an idea, a sense of if it's going to come out in the form of an essay next or a memoir or, novel again, you don't have to answer it. You don't have to.
Yeah. The question is basically, what's next?
Yeah, you have a brilliant brain. You have to.
And more nice
things.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, I wish that I had the next nugget of the book or could like summarize. I do think I was surprised to write a novel. I studied fiction writing in college, but we just wrote short stories and novel writing. The novel is something you kind of work on in graduate level fiction writing, which I never did. I was, plugging away in medical school instead. So it was sort of this thing that I was like, oh, maybe I'll try it. And I kind of worked on it and I would put it aside and kind of never thought I would finish it or never thought it would be something I would show to someone. And then lo and behold, like years later, I was like, well, maybe I'll show this to someone. Like it kind of has a beginning and a middle and an end. And it became something that I was then working on the way I had worked on the memoir, where I said, oh, this is actually like a whole book. I don't know where or if that'll come next, but I do feel like, once you feel like you've done something and you enjoyed it and you learned something from it, you're like, okay, I could do that again. But the lightning bolt has not yet struck. So the essays these days, I'm like fortunate that one thing, fortunate not to run out of material because there's always another horrible assault on, even if it's not like, I feel like reproductive rights and reproductive justice have been sort of like out of the news cycle lately because of all the other things in the news cycle, but it's like, there's so many terrible things happening, like especially on the story level, on like the level of the individual human being. I mean, yeah, you could fill a book a month, So I'm fortunate these days that usually someone will come to me now, like I can kind of be working on book stuff in the background and someone will come to me and say like, did you hear about this awful thing happening? And like, would you want to write about it for us? But short writing, it usually comes by just, being incensed about something, whether someone points it out to me or asks me to write about it, or from me just sitting there thinking about it and realizing that I have also like don't really figure out that I have an argument about it until I've written it down. And then I think like, oh, maybe this is a valid point. Maybe someone would want to read it. So those kind of come up more organically and more frequently. The book thing might take a while.
All right, we have one more question at the back. You're the last one.
Okay. Well, I love you for so many reasons, and I love your writing for so many reasons. And I think one of them is that you lean into nuance and humanity and kind of like the reality of issues and don't present them any way other than what they are in your like essays and in your novels. And I think I've like on a much smaller scale tried to lean into nuance when I've had my limited opportunities to speak about these issues that matter a lot to me. And one thing I've like been felt limited by is my concern about one day regretting what I'm writing or what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. And so, and I find that kind of like limits my voice. And so I'm curious if you've ever regretted something you've written or what are your strategies to mitigate that?
That is such a thoughtful question. The question is about when you write something, fearing or speak publicly in any way about something, being held back by a fear of regretting something that you've said, maybe because you've gotten new information or something else has changed, or whatever, you change your mind later, and whether I've ever regretted anything I've written. I think about that quite a bit because I once heard the advice, that when you are in an argument, or if you really want to convince someone of something, you should put yourself in a position where, what if the facts change? Later you learn that the facts are not what you thought they were, and always speak as though that could happen, which is hard to do. But I also think it speaks to I think 99% of people definitely do not do that. And so it speaks to so much humility, and especially because I know you're a physician. Even in our practice, right? Like it's hard to imagine, God, what if we had that humility even just every time we counseled a patient, let alone, go and publish something in a newspaper or in the form of a book. And it's a tough question to say whether I've regretted something I've written. I have definitely learned some things about how I think I'm not a very private person, and that's like part of writing for me, part of why writing feels natural. But when you write about real people, you have to really consider that they might be more private, or that, the idea of putting something out into the world and sharing it as like, this is the way I experienced it, even if just as a doctor, what it was like for me to care for this patient. Certainly respecting the patient's privacy, but also just like in a conversation with someone, privacy is a tricky thing. So I think I've learned some things about how to talk to people whose ideas or experiences I want to include in my work. I think some of my writing, there are things that I've written that I have changed how I feel about it. There's in my memoir, for example, I wrote at the time that I believe that every woman who came to me for an abortion was a mother, and that I should think of her as a mother. And that, just with experience and practice and talking with patients and talking with people who've had abortions, like that was very narrow in my view. And I was a young mother myself at that time. And now I don't see it that way anymore. And so, someone might point that out to me someday and say like, oh, you said this, do you really think that? And I would have to be like, well, no, like not anymore really. But do I regret writing it? No, but there are things that I think, that I would handle differently, the way I approached people who I wrote about, or the way I describe things that happened in my life. I think sometimes some of the things I've written betray like some of that naivete as a writer or as a mother. But that's just me growing, right? So if I let that hold me back, then I can never get to be that more experienced writer and human being. I do think it's hard. I think it's hard. And having humility and having a public voice often conflict with each other.
And regret is part of the human experience. And as a non-writer, but a reader, I think if you also wrote about the regret that you had, if that ever came up, like that takes you down a whole different pathway to be able to be authentic with your voice, both now and in the future. And I think Car is going to come say some things.
Great. I'm just here to say, can we have one more hand for Christina? Thank you so much. I think we're also at this is a particularly unique opportunity also to hear someone who is both works in women's healthcare and is an advocate for reproductive justice, writing about these things in fiction, which I think is a really special and a unique opportunity. Usually fiction writers are fiction writers, and usually people who work in women's healthcare are working in women's healthcare. So it's really nice that we get to have this combination. Anna, thank you so much for reading so closely and asking these great questions. Thank you all for being here and being a part of this evening. I would be remiss if I didn't mention once more that the books that you purchased tonight, a portion of the proceeds benefit Access Reproductive Justice. You can also donate to them directly. We have a QR code just at the back desk there. You can take a look at it, go to their website, and donate to them directly there. They're doing very vital and important work, as was echoed and during this conversation. Okay, brief business. Christine's books are available at the front register. You can find them there. They are near where you came in. She is going to be right here where she is now, signing them. So you can get them at the front, bring them right here. I am the front of the signing line. This is where you should be. If you have any other questions, do let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much once again, and we'll see you next time.